Jungle Cruise is the latest Disney live-action film to hit theaters and is directed by Joanne Colette Sierra. This was a movie I had actually been looking forward to for quite a while. After seeing the preview a few months ago, the movie immediately piqued my interest, seeing how it was reminiscent of movies like Pirates of the Caribbean and Indiana Jones. And even if neither of those franchises have released a really good movie in years, they hold a very special place in my heart, and seeing that classic Disney adventure movie finally make a return was something I was looking ahead to. Especially with Emily Blunt, The Rock, and Jesse Plemons attached to the project, I feel like I had every right to be excited for this one. And this movie was pretty decent. If I'm being wholeheartedly honest, it was really disappointing though. I did enjoy it overall, like I just said, the movie was pretty decent. But man, it did leave a lot to desire. The tone of the film was completely off, a lot of the emotional stakes had zero weight to them, and honestly, I couldn't really care less about the characters. Getting the major elephant out of the room first of all, The Rock was severely miscasted in this film. I like The Rock, don't get me wrong. As a former pro wrestling fan and just a fan of the guy in general, I can confidently say he did not fit into this movie whatsoever. All of the corny dad jokes and snark of the characters should have come off as charming instead of just falling flat like they did with The Rock. For as many talents as the guy has, playing the snarky, charming asshole who is a little reserved and kind of quiet is just not one of them. There's a severe waste of this guy's talents and is probably the movie's biggest glaring hole. Even if all the performances were fun and likable enough, this movie has a major lack of compelling characters. Besides the younger brother of Emily Blunt's character, who was great throughout the entire runtime, he was fantastic. Really disappointed that he wasn't a big part of the marketing, because he is a pretty big part of the movie, and I thought he was great. Everyone besides him just fell kind of flat for me. Emily Blunt and The Rock had no chemistry together whatsoever, and the moments that were supposed to have emotional weight to them with those two really just did not stick the landing. Even if Jesse Plemons is always great to see and was very fun in the role, the German Prince antagonist was very severely underutilized, almost being an afterthought throughout the entire film. To me, Jungle Cruise's main issue is its script, and more specifically the tone that the script was going for. It was all over the place. You couldn't tell if its moments were supposed to be sad, funny, exciting, maybe in a mix of both. I really couldn't tell why certain decisions were made when it comes to the story, and the movie's tone just suffers immensely for it. The ghost villains of the movie are not intimidating whatsoever, the emotional beats are confusing and never pay off, it can be very derivative of Pirates of the Caribbean in places. This movie really just doesn't know what it wants to be at times, and that really bogs down the overall enjoyment of the film. But don't get me wrong here, I still somewhat enjoyed my time with Jungle Cruise. The movie was entertaining overall. Even if the story was pretty jumbled and never had a clear direction, I'm still very much a sucker for this specific kind of adventure flick. The jungle environment, the different puzzles and curses, and every other kind of unique obstacle the characters had to deal with was fun, and I like seeing a PG-13 Disney movie that was actually somewhat PG-13. This didn't feel like it was pandering too much and really was a turn-off-your-brain, fun and entertaining adventure movie. I want Disney to start making movies like this again, with a lot more effort put into them for sure, but still, I wouldn't mind it in the slightest if we get more Disney films based off of different rides or somewhat of an action-adventure plot. They make for a pretty fun time overall, and Jungle Cruise is no different from that. The movie is severely flawed, yes, but Emily Blunt is great in the movie. Everything having to do with the jungle itself and all the different curses and everything like that was entertaining, and all of the action was super fun. This movie did just enough to get a pass from me, even if it was pretty disappointing and highly forgettable. Very light B- for Jungle Cruise. And our second movie up is Old, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. This was a movie that I was skeptical about ever since I saw the trailer in theaters. Even if Shyamalan has somewhat gotten back on track in the past couple of years and has been going through a resurgence of sorts, that trailer had me scared for all the wrong reasons. It was strange, to say the least. Even if the overall concept was an intriguing one, the trailer gave me the same feelings as seeing The Happening or The Last Airbender for the first time, and I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. In my head, all of the prior excitement for this movie had died right then and there, and I just did not want to even think about this thing. However, as a little bit of time passes between then and now, and I saw all of the mixed reviews the movie was getting, I had to check it out. My suspicions were still firmly in the front of my head, but I went into the movie with higher hopes than I had originally anticipated. And man, were my initial instincts right. This was certainly something. Old is very much a Shyamalan movie in so many ways. And let's get the elephant out of the room, rip the Band-Aid off, be very clear about how I feel about this movie. Old was bad. Just straight up a bafflingly terrible movie. I honestly didn't think it was possible for Shyamalan to outdo himself with terrible dialogue, having seen Lady in the Water and The Happening, but man, this movie was a whole new low. Sounding like complete and utter nonsense, the conversations each character has with each other is so awkward, so stiff, and so non-human that it feels like a literal robot would have a better perception of real human interaction than M. Night. All the dialogue here is so atrocious, and the characters were not at all in the slightest bit well written. I've seen so many people try and argue that there was supposed to be something off about the characters and that the way they interact with each other was supposed to be not human, but even on that level it doesn't work. It's just so hard to wrap my head around what he was thinking while writing this thing. And before the movie's third act, everything that was supposed to be creepy or disturbing was honestly just kind of gross and uncomfortable. I really did not like some of the directions Shyamalan went with the twists and turns, and I felt like he had no real direction on where the plot was headed. This movie feels like that one friend who always had a great idea for a screenplay, but when they finally get to writing it, they have zero idea what they're doing, and it's just a complete mess. It's almost as if the man learned nothing from his past blunders, his past blunders, and just went back to making completely batshit insane, terrible movies. There were several times while watching this movie that I looked over to Cam and almost asked if we could leave the theater. This movie was an absolute chore to sit through the first hour, maybe even hour and a half. It's just poorly written characters reacting to the same 3 different events that just keep happening over and over and over. It's not clever, it's not suspenseful, it's not thrilling, it's a mess. This movie is in shambles from the first 5 minutes, and honestly, I only stayed to keep seeing the train wreck. Plus, the cinematography was admittedly fantastic, and there was a lot of beautiful atmospheric shots in the movie that kept me occupied while the story was going absolutely nowhere. And then everything came to a head in the confusing, incredibly muddled third act that kind of had me entertained. I really hate to admit it, because I didn't even want to mention how much I enjoyed the final 30 minutes of this movie, but it almost makes the rest of the film worse. The fever dream, completely dumpster fire of pretentiousness that was the first 2 acts of this film was replaced by a chilling, very tightly written finale that made a ton of sense. Old did a completely 180 in terms of quality, and was strangely making me forget how truly awful this movie is. It started to be actually creepy on purpose. The dialogue didn't feel like a random assortment of video game cutscenes, and it felt like the movie had a clear-cut direction in what it was trying to accomplish for once. Also, side note here, before any of you say anything, I understand that a movie doesn't have to be straightforward in order for it to be good. There are plenty of movies with plots that are all over the place and jumbled that are great. However, the difference between them and Old is that they still have a clear goal in mind, whether it's to make you feel a certain way or not feel anything at all or make you think. This movie has no idea what it wants you, the audience, to get out of it. That final third act was the final nail in the coffin for this movie, honestly, because it showed the movie had a ton of potential. Again, with Shyamalan, I feel like a broken record saying that with almost all of his movies. It showed that Shyamalan had the capability of actually caring about this movie, but it was way too little, way too late. Old was such a weirdly confusing, badly written train wreck of a film, and I won't be forgetting this one for a long time, and not for the right reasons. Even if it had a lot of potential and some things really going for it, it was just a colossal failure, and I'm going to give it a D+. I had written a light C-, but honestly right now I'm thinking a strong D+, because this thing, man, it was pretty bad. So, thank you guys so much for watching this double review, and I will see you later.